Create enriching experiences beyond the classroom through ACSI Student Leadership and Learning with Emily Pigott.
Well, hello and welcome to the Student Leadership and Learning podcast, where we journey together to impact, influence, and equip today's students to lead with intentionality and purpose. Well, I'm Emily Pigott, and it is truly my prayer and my hope that as we learn together, we're reminded of our why we do this work, why we keep showing up, why we keep investing, and why the way we form students matters just as much as the opportunities we give them. So let's begin with a picture that probably is going to feel a little bit familiar. So a group of students is preparing for a school program. There's a microphone at the front of the room and a welcome table near the door, chairs that need to be straightened, supplies, of course, that need to be carried in, and one nervous younger student who has no clue what to do. So several students, of course, will be immediately interested in the microphone. Fewer notice the welcome table. Almost nobody notices the younger students standing alone. Now, that doesn't make these students selfish or bad. Of course not. It makes them human. And it reveals something about the culture forming them. They are growing up in a world that continually asked, who noticed you? How many people saw it? Did you get credit? Did someone post it? So visibility has become a kind of currency, if you will, and recognition, it's not inherently wrong, but encouragement matters. Celebration matters. Students should know when they've done something well, but there is something deeply formative and almost, I would say, deeply dangerous when student leadership becomes primarily about being seen. Because students, they can learn to desire the position, of course, without embracing the responsibility that comes along with it. They can learn to perform leadership without being formed as servant leaders. So today I want us to consider one central question. How do we form students who will still serve when the microphone is off, the camera's gone, and no one is clapping? That is what it means to lead beyond the spotlight. And in this cultural moment, it may be one of our most countercultural and faithful things we do as Christian educators. So before we can form students differently, we have to name the water they're swimming in. So the message around them is subtle but persistent. Visibility equals value. Their world is filled with public metrics, likes, views, followers, awards, ranking, recognition. Even ordinary experiences can begin to feel unfinished until someone else sees them. And over time, those metrics do more than measure attention. They begin to actually shape the identity of our students. The internal message becomes, if I'm seen, I matter. If I'm recognized, I'm leading. If I'm not noticed, I must be falling behind. And here is where this simply becomes especially important for leadership formation. Sometimes students are not simply seeking influence. They are seeking validation through their influence. So what we see in small moments, a student is eager to lead worship, but reluctant to help tear down afterwards. Another wants to be team captain, but avoids the teammate who needs encouragement. A class officer begins with creative ideas, but does not follow through on the details that make those ideas possible. Maybe a student volunteers when the work is public, yet disappears when leadership looks like arriving early, staying late, apologizing, or of course doing the same task for the third or 100th time. We should be careful here. Our first response should not be, what is wrong with these students? Of course not. A better question would be, what has been forming their understanding of leadership? What we are seeing is often not defiance. It's not necessarily a lack of desire to serve. It's about formation. Students have absorbed a definition of leadership that emphasizes platform, personality, and public affirmation. If that is the only definition available to them, they will naturally reach for the visible role and miss the quiet responsibility. John 12:43 frames this for us, for they have loved human praise more than praise from God. So that verse is not simply condemning a group of people. Of course not. It reveals a temptation in every human heart. When praise becomes the goal, leadership slowly shifts from serving others to protecting an image. We avoid the difficult conversations because we want to remain liked. And the gospel speaks clearly into that temptation because Jesus does not merely offer a nicer style of leadership. He gives us a different definition of greatness. And I love this, Matthew 20:26. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Notice what Jesus does not say. He doesn't say don't lead. He doesn't say influence is wrong. He doesn't say giftedness should be hidden. In fact, he is saying you have misunderstood greatness. Let me redefine it for you. See, if we do not intentionally give students that counter formation, the culture will gladly hand them another vision. And of course, I remember working with students who were genuinely eager for leadership roles. They wanted to contribute, they had ideas, they wanted the title, the platform, the opportunity to be heard. I loved working with students who had a desire to lead. But when leadership required serving behind the scenes, taking responsibility without recognition, following through after the exciting part was over, or completing the work that felt ordinary, that's when there was a differentiation in my students. And that moment clarified something for me. They learned how to seek leadership, but they had not yet learned how to steward leadership. So not only is that become a challenge for students, but adults, of course, we can do that too. We can enjoy vision more than the execution. We can embrace the part of leadership that lets us inspire people, but resist the part that requires us to listen, to repair, to organize, to follow up. Our students are constantly leaning in and watching and looking. And sometimes we reward the polished students, the confident speaker, the quick thinker, the student who naturally takes charge. And we unintentionally overlook the student who notices what others miss, who keeps the promise, who welcomes the outsider, who quietly makes the whole group better. But those quiet acts are not leadership adjacent. They are leadership. Philippians 2:13 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceits. That is such a rally cry for how we develop our students. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself. If servant leadership is our goal, our first work is not strategy. It is our heart posture. The question is not simply, can this student lead? The deeper question is, what kind of person is this student becoming as they lead? You see, Jesus didn't merely explain service, he embodied it. He gave us the most beautiful example of it. He confronted spotlight-driven leadership directly. The disciples repeatedly wrestled with who would be greatest. They wanted to know where they were ranked and who would sit closest to Jesus. And Jesus did not answer by creating a better ranking system. He reframed the entire conversation. I love how he does that. In Mark 9, he places a child among them and he says, someone with little social standing, someone that the world doesn't see as great. He connects greatness with welcoming the one others could overlook. Then in John 13, Jesus does something unforgettable. He gets up from the meal. He wraps a towel around his waist. He pours water in the basin, and he washes his disciples' feet. The one with every right to be served takes the posture of a servant. And see, those details matter. Servant leadership, it's not simply doing kind things for appreciative people. It's choosing faithfulness because of Christ, who is of who Christ is, not because of how others respond. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. John 13:14. See, Jesus doesn't surrender his authority when he picks up the towel. He shows us what godly authority is. Authority is not given so we can make much of ourselves. It is entrusted so we can use our strength, our position, our access, and our influence for the good of others. See, servant leadership is strength submitted to love. I love that phrase. It is authority exercised for another person's flourishing. And this is why students need more than a lesson about service. They need to experience a culture where service is normal, where responsibility is honored, where reflection is expected, and the adults around them, of course, model what they are asking their students to become. And this is when servant leadership becomes a mirror. So let me give you a simple tool you can use personally with a student leadership team or an advisory group, or basically in any classroom project. I call it a servant leader mirror. A mirror is not there to shame us. It helps us to see what is actually present. And these 4 questions can help move leadership from activity to formation. So first, asking the question, who is this for? What are we doing this for? Servant leadership begins by shifting our attention away from ourselves, and we ask who benefits from this leadership? Whose needs are we trying to meet? Who might be overlooked if we only design this around the most visible people? So imagine a student government planning, maybe Spirit Week or a spiritual emphasis week. It's easy to ask what should be fun? How do we lead this in? But a servant leader is going to ask who might have difficulty participating? How will a new student experience this? Does every activity reward the loudest or most athletic student, or have we created ways for different students to belong? Second question to ask, what responsibility has been entrusted to me? Servant leaders take and they steward responsibility. They don't care about status. They ask, what has God placed in my care right now? What promise did I make? What small task belongs to me, even if it feels beneath the role that I wanted? A student may say, I want more leadership. I heard this all the time with my students. Our response can be, hey, let's first look at what is already in your hands. Are people able to depend on you? Do you come prepared? Do you follow through without being chased? Do you care for the people connected to the task? Because more responsibility should grow out of faithfulness with present responsibility. Luke 16:10, whoever can be trusted with a little can be trusted again then with much. And then third, how do I respond when my service is unseen? This question reveals motivation. Do I become resentful when no one notices? Do I need my name attached to the results? Would I still do this carefully if no one thanked me? So suppose a student stays after an event to stack chairs. I've seen this a million times. Or maybe they stay after an athletic event and they're cleaning out the bleachers. That's a very good option. But reflection takes the formation deeper. What were you thinking when others left? What were you thinking when you looked around and you were the only one doing this? Did that irritate you? Did you hope an adult would notice? Did you happen to look around? And then what helped you continue? What helped you finish that? We're not trying to make students to just want to do tasks because they want encouragement. We want to help them recognize what their heart is learning to love. The unseen is not where leadership disappears. It's often where leadership matures. And then the fourth question is, what is God forming in me through this service? Service does not only change what is happening around us, God is using it to change us. Where am I being stretched? What am I learning about patience and courage and humility and compassion and perseverance? Where did my selfishness surface? That self-reflection moment is so important when we're developing student leaders. Where did I see Christ help me respond differently? So what can we do this week? Not someday, but this week, this school year, to cultivate leadership beyond the spotlight. First, let's broaden what we name as leadership. Let's not communicate and only celebrate the student who gave the speech. Let's name the student who noticed a need, who kept a commitment, who invited someone in, who repaired a mistake, who made another person successful, who pushed someone else into that spotlight. You might say, I watched the student quietly explain the directions to a classmate who was confused. That is leadership. Or maybe you might say another student realized the group was leaving someone out and changed the conversation. That is leadership. Instead of handing out generic praise, let's be very specific when we see leadership in action, and let's call it out. And let's design our leadership roles around responsibility, not prestige. Every visible role should carry an invisible responsibility. If a student leaves from the stage, perhaps that student also helps prepare the room. If a student captains the team, maybe part of that role is checking on the teammate who is struggling. If students plan an outreach project, they should also perhaps write thank you notes at the end, maybe clean up the space or evaluate where the work truly served the people involved. And then third, maybe we rotate access to meaningful responsibility. Not every student needs the same role, but every student needs opportunities to exercise influence. That quiet student may lead through welcome. That highly organized student may lead through follow through. The creative student may help others imagine possibility. And the student has struggled may become the person who recognizes struggle in someone. And fourth, let's reflect. Let's reflect after the work is finished. Let's ask the question, who did this help? What did it require of you? What is God teaching you through it? See, without reflection, students may complete the service, but the service won't shape their identity if we don't reflect what happened and make sure that we are aligned. And finally, let's model it. Students pay attention to what we do with inconvenience, with credit, what we do with correction. Do we take responsibility when something is ours? We can't form in students what we consistently excuse in ourselves. But the good news is that we don't have to model perfection. We model repentance. We model humility. We model growth. Sometimes the strongest leadership lesson we can give a student is, hey, I handled that poorly and I'm sorry. Let's work together to make it right. So let's return to the room where we began, the microphone up at the front, the welcome table near the door, the chairs that need to be moved, and the younger students standing alone. Our goal is not to teach students that the microphone is bad. Of course not. We need students up front. Some students are called and gifted to stand at it. Our goal is to form the kind of student who can hold the microphone without needing it for identity, and who can set it down the moment love requires something else of them. The student who walks past the spotlight to welcome the person no one noticed. The student who keeps a promise when the task has become inconvenient. The student who gives away credit, receives correction, tells the truth, and uses strength to help someone else flourish in their leadership. See, leadership does not need applause to be real. Influence does not require visibility to matter. And faithfulness is never wasted simply because it is unseen. So here's the challenge that I want to leave you with, and the challenge that I'm leaving myself with this week. Look for one act of leadership that would normally go unnoticed. Name it, connect it to the character of Christ, then give one student a meaningful responsibility that serves someone else, and make space afterwards to reflect on what God is forming through that. Because when we do that consistently, students begin to understand that leadership is not a stage they step onto. It is a way of faithfully carrying influence wherever God has placed them. And of course, as always, thank you for forming leaders who serve, not because they're seen, but because they see others, not because they need applause, but because they desire to be faithful. So until next time, lead with intention, teach with purpose, and keep pointing students towards leadership that looks like Jesus. And trust that even the unseen seeds you plant are shaping leaders for the kingdom. We'll see you next time.
Student Leadership and Learning is a presentation of the Association of Christian Schools International. Create enriching experiences beyond the classroom by visiting acsi.org/studentleadership.